For the first time in history, the deep structure of human beings is likely to start changing. We are the same animals we were in the Middle Ages. We are still the same animals we were in biblical times or even in the Stone Age. This is why we can so easily connect to people or to works of art. But when I look 100 years, say, to the future or 200 years to the future, I think for the first time, it's very likely that not just our technology and economics and politics will change, humanity itself will change. The bodies, the brains, the mind structure, mental structures. It's a reasonable bet that in a century or two, our planet will be dominated by entities which are much more different from you and me than we are different from Neanderthals or even chimpanzees. They might be, for example, inorganic entities. After 4 billion years of organic evolution, maybe within a very short time, we will see non-organic entities taking over. And this is completely new. It's nothing like the rise of Christianity or the Industrial Revolution or the Second World War. For most of history, humans thought about life as a drama of decision-making. You look at religion, it's all about, choosing between good and evil. Almost every great or not so great piece of art, from Shakespeare to the latest Netflix series, it usually revolves around the hero or the heroine needing to make some important decision, to be or not to be, to marry X or to get married to Y. And in a very short time, these decisions might be made not by organic stuff, by flesh. They might be shifting to the responsibility, to the power of inorganic stuff, of algorithms and AI that know us much better than we know ourselves and can make decisions in a wide range of areas.
In the present, people make decisions that are both biased and noisy. And what we mean by noise is that they're unstable and that they're different from the judgments and decisions that other people would make in exactly the same situation. That it turns out that the mistakes that people make, the errors that people make in their judgments and decisions, are due just about as much, or possibly more, to noise than they are to bias.
The impact will be everywhere, even in areas that people think, well, no, this is a human speciality. AI will be able to drive cars better, but things that has to do with emotional intelligence or creativity, no, this will forever remain the human preserved, human speciality. Emotional intelligence in essence is no different from other kinds of intelligence. It's also based on pattern recognition. I don't think that AI will have emotions of its own. One of the common mistakes is to think that in order to have emotional intelligence, in order, for example, to recognize that somebody else is angry, you need to, at least some days, be angry yourself. This is obviously not true. Anger is a biological phenomenon. It's all kinds of muscles contracting and neurons firing and hormones being released to the bloodstream. And we recognize anger partly by comparing what's happening to the other person to how I feel. But it doesn't have to be like that. I know how you're feeling by analyzing signals coming from your body. Your tone of voice, the movements of the muscles in your face, your eyes, your mouth. I've learned to recognize the signals of anger. A computer can do that also without ever being angry. It's just an algorithm. This is relevant everywhere, from investing in the stock market, which we know, so much of economics is psychology. And so much of the boom and bust cycles are driven by the emotions of either individual people or huge collectives. It's fair to say that the number of people who really understand how the financial system works, it's less than 1% of the people on Earth. And that's a very generous estimate, I think. In 20 years, the number of people who understand how the financial system works might be exactly zero. It will be so complicated, so fast, so dominated by these increasingly sophisticated algorithms that no human being will be able to really understand what's happening on the financial markets.
With AI taking over many of the unskilled and possibly some of the skilled activities, then there will be people for whom seems to be society won't have much use for these people. And the idea of UBI, of universal basic income, being the solution to that strikes me as a bit of a fantasy. I don't think this is coming. I don't think it's a solution. So what I see is a huge disruption. That is, before we get to the world that Yuval envisaged in his description of the future, there's going to be a complete destabilization of the human condition and of human societies. This is not going to happen quietly, and we have no idea. We're seeing instability growing with technological change even now. Some of the changes that we are seeing, growing populism in many countries and so on, is from people living life whose meaning tends to vanish. And clearly, as we have seen, this can destabilize the country. We were not very far in the United States from this. And if you take a perspective of decades, it will certainly destabilize the world.
It's not no longer just about cutting down forests and planting wheat and building cities. It's about changing the brain, changing the body. It goes much deeper. But I'm most worried about the fact that we have very little margin for error. When I look at previous big changes in history, let's take the last big one, the Industrial Revolution. There was a huge change in everything, in what people do for a living, in where people live. And you can say, we made some mistakes, but in the end, all things considered, the world became better. If you look at the world in the year 2000, or even 2021, and compare it to the world in 1750, at the very outset of the Industrial Revolution, on most of the parameters, human parameters that we can measure, animals, ecology, it's a different story, that's terrible. But if you just look at the humans, almost all the indicators are positive. We live longer, huge decrease in child mortality, huge decrease in famine, in violence. After all, we solved it. We solved the problem of how to use the power of industry for the benefit of humanity. We don't have a margin for error in the 21st century. This time, we need to get it right in the first go.
When the rate of change is very rapid, then that requires adjustments. The rate of change is clearly higher than people's ability to cope with it. We are in a situation of great peril because of these huge developments and because of the speed at which they are happening, which seems to be incompatible with our limited ability to react to events. The speed of change and the speed of news seems to be accelerating. The shifts of interests and probably the number of times that people consult their phone during a day makes our minds vulnerable to shifts